Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Hello, and welcome to Champion Psychology, a show with the goal of openly talking about mental health and gaming, presented by Codename Entertainment and TakeThis.org. Every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on twitch.tv/CNE Games. Normally, Mitra Jordan and Raffael Boccamazzo, aka Dr. B, talk about mental health and gaming and how gaming affects us. But this week we have a special guest who I'm going to be introducing here in a moment. If you have any questions during the episode, you can put them in the chat with question, and then your question, and I, Treavor Bettis, will read them out at the end of the episode. Before we introduce Mitra as we normally do, Cassie, who are you for the fine folks who may not know?
Hi, I'm Dr. B.
I actually remembered to change the name.
Reasons.
I remembered to change the name. I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah. This is when Dr. B puts on his hats. Sometimes he takes on an entirely different form, and the hat turns into a tiara.
Dr. B found a new tiara this week, and once he put it on, the magic of Cassie was found.
It's true. I have locked Dr. B in a closet called GDC, and so I'm here instead. Operation Replace All the White Men with Black Queers has begun!
Next week it will just be two Cassies.
Yeah, it's just that even though I'm also at GDC, Cassie kindly, made sure that I had a window. So.
So I'm Cassie. I am the clinical program manager at Take This. I am also a licensed clinical social worker and trauma therapist who sees adults and relationships of all kinds. And I specialize in the intersections of identity, trauma, and mental wellness. So I'm here because for Valentine's Day, there was a show about love where some things were wrong.
I left them alone. I left them alone together.
There is a reason I never claimed to be an expert on anything ever. Listen to me at your own discretion.
And so then there was a second episode, and there was still no non-monogamy. And so I am here to rectify the injustice.
To be fair, Dr. B said, he legitimately said, I want to avoid that and save that for Cassie. Because Dr. B has been just so excited for this episode that you're going to be on.
New title today, blame it on Dr. B.
Because he's always here, even when he's not.
It's true. It's true. He's going to get a lot of email suggestion Gmail accounts today. Mitra, who are you for the fine folks who may not know?
So I'm Mitra Jordan. I am not a clinical director of anything, but I am a registered clinical counselor in Victoria, BC. I work with individuals, families, dyads generally. Hence, yes, that's a lot of my work. But I also really appreciate games and working with people who identify differently than traditional heteronormative identifications that people have. And I'm thrilled to be learning from Cassie today. So.
Yeah, this is an episode that we talked about last week that Cassie was going to be on, but like literally behind the scenes, Dr. B has just been so excited as soon as Cassie said that they could be on. It's just like yes. So we've
Yes.
been looking for this one, and I love the title the two of you picked out for this, which is "Forgotten Love: the friends we left behind." It's such a
Yeah.
dramatic title, and I love it so much.
I think
Yes.
Dr. B told me many times that Cassie and I would get along really well. And honestly, I don't think I've laughed so hard in a long time. We had really a lot of fun.
I
So,
love it.
yeah.
So yeah, what let's start things off the way we normally do this. Why are we talking about this?
It's not being talked about enough. And I'll hand that over to Cassie. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So like when we talk about relationships, the trendy thing to do is only talk about romantic, sexual, monogamous relationships, and that is a whole mess because relationships are literally everything in our lives.
Mhm.
Everything from friends to employment to anything else we're relating to people. And so when we like take this small sliver and make it everything, then we get, I don't know, everything we're dealing with right now where no one can relate to each other. So,
Yeah. And also, people aren't leveraging all of their other relationships and therefore their relational strengths into their intimate relationships. So I'll often have people come and say, I have no experience with intimate relationships. I don't know what to do here. I kind of want to have intimate relationships, but I'm not sure what form they should take. And I don't know. And I'm like, you have a family. What's your relationship with them like? And you have friends. Tell me about that. And tell me about times when it's been tough with friends and what sort of repair have you guys been able to do to keep that friendship going, and how have you managed to keep friendships going over distance, and it's all of that. And they're like,
And
oh,
how many times have you met with
right.
that's different. That's friend love. Like that's not the same.
which
Only some of the time, not
Okay,
as
that's
much as you would
good.
think, but I do think that it has to be brought into your consciousness to value it. I do think that as we talked about, it's easy for us to devalue that and to dismiss it, which is a problem.
and that idea of just friends,
Mm.
get rid of it. Trash.
Yeah.
Just like a dumpster fire of an idea, because what we're doing is we're creating that a hierarchy that sets us up to mistreat people, right? The idea that, oh, my relationship to you is lesser because we're not smashing genitals is wild, right? Like you would not say that to your mother. And I say this as someone who has a terrible relationship with my mother. But nonetheless, right? Like just friends doesn't mean anything when you think about it, because a lot of times it is friendships that are our first foray into love outside of a familial context, right? Like we generally don't quite understand, those of us who develop sexual attraction, that part never, that piece never came for me. So yeah, but the first thing you experience is that intimacy and that closeness with another person at school or at daycare before you're like, genital smashing is a thing I like. And whether you do or don't, that doesn't make those relationships any less important. The same way that, surprise, just because you may be sexually and or romantically interested in multiple people does not necessarily negate your love and commitment and intimacy with any of those folks, just because there are more than one.
Well, one of the things I wanted to pick up on that you mentioned earlier was the hierarchy. when you say that, do you mean like how it's just like, oh well, like they're my best friend, or these are just my normal friends, but this is my girlfriend, so like they're above that? Like, is that what you're talking about there?
I am both talking in that sense, and then in non-monogamy, specifically polyam. You'll notice I will say polyam because Polynesian people have asked non-monogamous people to stop saying poly,
Mm.
and to use polyam. And so just an explainer there. But even in polyam, folks will have sometimes hierarchies between their nesting partner or their primary partner is a term you'll hear a lot. And so
Hmm.
whether it's your, best friend or your boyfriend versus your girlfriend versus your primary versus your comet versus your metamor, I'm throwing out terms I know people don't know. I'll explain them in a second. Is creating a system in which objectifying and devaluing people is normalized, right? You don't have to have a completely even playing field. Some people may get priority in certain situations, but that's true situationally. And if your friend is sick, that may be a time where you do bail on your girlfriend
Mm.
because like they needed you and so you were late or you had to cancel because you were the only person available to help, and that's healthy community, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what we all want. Now the terms I threw out earlier, okay, primary partner is in hierarchical non-monogamous relationships, that's like the main partner, the main coupling. And so that person may get veto power to please stop using veto power in
Is that
relationships.
really a thing?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
Um because monogamy has infected everything.
Oh.
So that's a thing. It's not great. There's only a couple of legit uses for them. I will say there's slight veto power sometimes in my relationships, and in that like there's possibilities where someone may be accidentally dating someone who is my client and I can't tell them that. And so that would be a situation in which I would say I can't meet this person. I can't tell you why, but I'm just going to say I don't know that this is great.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the only time it's like
Mhm.
super helpful, but yeah, so primary partners tend to be in hierarchical relationships. They're the top, they get priority, they get more whatever. Sometimes for relationships where only one type of genital is allowed, they may have set or be that one and only, in that way. Comet is a relationship where just like a comet, they come around, but they're not always there. And so while they're around, the relationship is still beautiful and loving and there, but when they're not, it's less present. It may fall into more of a friendship, wherein it may be more of a partnership when they're around.
Hmm.
And then metamor is the term for the partner of my partner. So
Okay.
so if I am dating Mitra and Mitra is dating you, Treavor,
Mhm.
Treavor, you would be my metamor.
Okay. That's also
I
just a
think
fun
that's all
word to
the
say.
jargon I threw.
Okay, okay. That does clear things up. I was looking at it one way there, and there's a again I joked earlier I needed more coffee to have the realizations I was gonna have. I'm already learning things. We're like 15 minutes in. Um
Yeah.
so besides that, like we were talking about different types of love, and there might be people out there is like, okay, well, what are we talking about? Like the ones that might spring to mind is like familial, friendship, and romantic. is there others that they might not be thinking about?
Yeah, there are. So, actually, the Greeks had like 8 or 11 of them.
Really?
They had a lot, depending on how nitty gritty you wanted to go. Some of them have translated over, right? So, familial love translates, friendship love is philia, and then romantic has multiple kind. Each section has multiple different kinds in it, and so like. I think that's something that we're starting to get there with attraction, because as ace folks have gotten more into the mainstream, we have been able to gift everyone our conceptualizations of attraction, which has helped. But the different kinds of love. So a lot of times what people focus on is what's called eros, which is that also called new relationship energy. Which is that burning, passionate, lustful, all-consuming, like
Cover of a
attraction
Harlequin
and
novel.
affection.
Yeah, which you can visit there, but you can't actually live there for very long because you wouldn't be doing
I
anything
like
else
that.
in your life, you know? So,
Yep.
I mean, honeymoons are absolutely designed to sort of focus on that, for example, or new love, like when you first get together. Absolutely. And you'll notice, like, yeah, I've kind of neglected other things, which fine for a while, you're immersing. But at some point, other forms of love take over in a healthy relationship.
Yeah. And so then like that can either progress into various other kinds. Like I said, the Greeks had a bunch of words for it, right? So like the kind of like long lasting love is called pragma. And so that's kind of what it segues into if the relationship and love is successful, so that you're not like losing your job because you're chilling in bed all day, engaging in your fiery burning passions. But then, right, we also have things like philia, which is more friendship, affectionate kind of love. We've got things like agape, which is the kind of love that you can have for really anybody, where you're setting aside um, yourself in a healthy way in order to help someone else, right? So that might be the thing where you go out of your way to bring a sick friend soup, right? That's going to be more on the lines of agape. And then, yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of concepts. I'm not going to go through all of them.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But what we're calling, even delineating, right? Friendship love, family love, romantic love, sexual love, and even those sorts of attraction, right? Is getting towards that, and is getting towards being able to break these things down and actually having real conversations and communication around what we want and hope our relationship to be with another person.
And I think we can see, even just in talking about it, that all of our relationships can contain aspects of these different kinds of love. You can bring soup to your partner too. You can bring soup to a dear friend. You can bring soup to your mom, right? And so some of them, we have specific relationships that we bring them to. We might bring eros to a number of different relationships that we define, specifically as either partner related, or even shorter term experiences. But there might be a broader piece where we just have a lot of affection for that particular person that's not in a committed kind of way, but there's a commitment to love and care for, right? So I think one of the challenges is the boundaries around these different kinds of experiences with love. We have to know where we stand. And so I'd be really curious about your thoughts on that, Cassie. I think we had pretty rich conversations about this ahead of time. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, everyone. You get nothing. We did it all backstage.
Sorry.
But there was a term that got brought up on the Love Stinks episode on Valentine's Day, relationship anarchy. And It's something that a lot of people don't understand because a lot of people misuse it to be jerks. The same way a lot of people will use non-monogamy to be jerks because what they're talking about is cheating. They're not talking about consensual non-monogamy where things have been discussed.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we talk about getting on the same page, when I start to get in relationships with people, as an ace queer non-monogamous person, right? We have conversations about what we want and not necessarily about what labels are, right? Because a lot of times relationship labels are actually a barrier to healthy relationship and communication. Like, what does boyfriend mean? What does partner mean? Like, those are like it's honestly speaking shorthand that we all learn, that we all use, but that is meaningless without discussion. And it's why so many people get in so many non-generative conflicts, because there's an assumption that boyfriend means exclusive to this person, and it doesn't here because partner's the exclusive term. Boyfriend just means we're dating, but I'm also dating other people, and that's okay. And people never talk about it. And so, like, when we talk about relationship anarchy, basically what it is a term that has been developed to mean you're not really labeling anything. You're not putting a hierarchy on anything. But what you are doing is anyone who's involved in the relationship is having very deep, explicit conversations philosophically and like in actuality about what they want, what they need, what their boundaries are. It looks very similar to negotiation and collaboration for like BDSM and kink, right? Where you are laying out, like, in this relationship, I don't want any kind of sex being part of this. I define sex as, this, and this. And then being like, I'm cool with that. But if sex isn't involved, I like cohabitation's not going to work for me. But I do want to make sure that we're spending time together. And for me, that means like a date night. I don't like passive spending time, like TV watching or stuff where we're in the same room. I like active time together, and having those very explicit, clear conversations of like, I don't experience sexual attraction, but I do experience aesthetic and intellectual attraction and kink attraction. And that's what these look like for me. And laying all of that out is an intentional relationship.
Yeah, in part two, we talked quite a bit about expectations. I think both part one and two about expectations in relationships and expectations based on roles. And one of the big problems that I see with kind of calling someone your spouse, say, or your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever these terms are that people are using, is that you may have a very specific idea about what that role involves. What does it look like to be that partner? What do you expect now from the other person, now that you've said, this is who we are together, right? And I may have very different expectations. And I may have grown up in a family with very specific or different templates around husband and what that means, or wife, what that means. And and in a heteronormative cultural groups, they're not really thinking about more specific definitions than that. It's out there, but it doesn't necessarily work for your particular relationship. No one is going to be able to read your mind. And one of the things I think we can learn from relationship anarchy is that we do need to be more specific about what we want and who we are in relationship. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we're gonna do a quick break to remind our viewers of our disclaimer, and then we'll talk. We're gonna talk a little bit about attraction before getting into our last bits of our topic. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.
Okay, so let's talk about attraction, because you brought that up a little bit ago. But one of the things that we talked about in our pre-show thing was attraction does not equal love, which was a thing that I heard at luckily a young age and somehow actually got into my head. What do you all want to talk about with that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I'm ace, which means asexual. And I'm also pretty far on the aromantic side. I think it may pop up occasionally, but I'm mostly aromantic. And so when we talk about attraction, it's generally people are like, "Oh, I am attracted to you." When I'm saying it, I'm talking about like specific kinds, and again, breaking down the term of, okay, so what does that mean? Because a lot of people assume that to mean like, I am sexually attracted to you, meaning you are a person that I would like to have sex with. I don't get that, right? I don't get the thing where it's like the Terminator skin. It's like, I want to have sex with you.
Like it's locking on, the text is coming up.
Locked on, initiate flirt protocol. But and so sexual attraction is one form, right? That's the I want to have sex with you. Romantic attraction is the other like very commonly discussed one, which is the like, you're the kind of person I want to like buy flowers and cuddle with and like do nice things for, and like, you know, red roses date night kind of gushy mooey like stuff. But then there's also getting more talked about intellectual attraction. If people have heard sapiosexual as a term that some folks may use, which is sexual attraction to intellect that is based off of being attracted to someone's mind or brain, right? It again doesn't have to be sexual. That is a lot more of the like, oh my God, your brain, it's beautiful. Can we talk more? I'd like to talk more. That would be intellectual attraction, right? I mentioned a kink attraction. That's like how I describe my like, cool, I want to play with you in whatever ways, shapes, or forms. Redacted for PG-13 reasons. And so basically it's this beautiful blossoming and unpacking of this idea of attraction, and the idea of like, I don't have to be sexually attracted to you to be aesthetically or physically attracted to you. I like aesthetically, I can be like, oh my God, your fashion sense, I love it. Yeah. Put it in a museum. I would look at it all day. Where did you get that coat? Right, and that's going to be more aesthetic attraction.
God, I feel that a lot. Just saying.
Right. Yeah. And what's beautiful about it is it gives us language to not necessarily label things, right? Of like, oh yeah, I'm this kind of attraction. No, you can experience multiple of them at various different times, and you may experience something with one person but not someone else of the same or different gender, right? And so like, but it gives us this beautiful language to be explicit in discussing our relationships and negotiating them and collaborating with the people we want to be in a relationship with, right? Like, friendship for me may not mean friendship for you. I expect my friends to be like close friends, to be intimate and vulnerable relationships, right? They can be completely platonic, but I'm at a stage in my life where like I'm not interested in spending a bunch of time cultivating a relationship that is not mutual, reciprocal, vulnerable, and loving. And love is not a feeling, it's an action. Love is a verb.
That goes right into the next thing there. So that might, I mean, obviously this morning I hadn't had enough coffee and I went, oh, what? And there's probably some folks out there doing the same. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So if anyone hasn't read Bell Hooks, All About Love, great book. Bell Hooks, anything by Bell Hooks is amazing. Will
Going
break
to
your brain.
Amazon
That's true.
And so when we talk about love, so often what we see in media is this actually really toxic version of a relationship that people are like, oh yeah, no, he's possessive because he loves me. No, sweetie, he's possessive because he thinks you're an object. Those sorts of things are not love. Love is a combination of care, respect, and action of those things. And so we're taught, oh, your family innately loves you. No, that is inaccurate. If you are being harmed, that's not love. They may care about you in a way that through their own trauma and life experiences, they have difficulty expressing in a healthy, humane way, which does not excuse their behavior, but can provide context. But we've got to decouple this idea of love with violence and abuse, because love's not violent. Love needs to be vulnerable. Love's not safe. We do have to open ourselves up, but that opening needs to be able to happen. And why would I remove my armor while you are holding a knife to my chest? Like, it's not gonna happen.
That did make me think of a situation in D&D where someone was like, all right, well, the enemy's right next to you. What do I do? I doff my armor.
It's fanfic for a reason, guys. It's like...
Mitra, you were going to say something there. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think that this piece around love versus what we might feel in families, right? I think that one of the things I often hear for clients is like, yeah, but they really loved me, as best they could. And my response is usually something like, the way we do love is really important, because the feelings you're talking about, they aren't enough. We need to pay attention to our actions and the actions of others. And yeah, we can have empathy for the way in which people are frozen or unable to act on perhaps the very real value and that outpouring that they might feel that they're not acting on. But what happens for a child is that they didn't get what they needed. It doesn't matter what you felt or even what you said if you weren't able to follow through and provide the love and safety and support that we need to grow into full people. Because otherwise there's an awful lot of repairing that goes on.
Well, the both of you are making me like have a realization about something that happened to me over the last few years. Cassie, I told you before the episode I'm donor conceived, and I've talked about on the show that I have like 13 half siblings or something. Like I haven't counted in a while. But like when we meet a new sibling, like one of the things that we usually say is like, hey, if you don't want to like be close family wise, like if you're not comfortable with like, even referring to you as a brother or sister or anything like that, like that's not expected here. You do not have to do that. It doesn't have to automatically be, oh, we're related, I have to love you. Like that's not it. And so like, you know, there's been times where like we'll be on a call, and like, you know, one of us might later is like, all right, love y'all, and like I will know like when that's the first time one of them has done that, I'm like, oh my heart. But but it's not one of those things that's like, if they don't say that, I'm not getting off the call like, oh, they don't love me like a sibling. It's like, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
We also had the advantage of being like 30 when we found each other, so
I think that freedom is really important, right? Our relationships, my sense of self is not based on you loving me. I'm still here and okay. I still know I'm okay. So you get to be free to feel how you need to feel. And I can hold the space. And I think about, you know, my kids whom I absolutely adore. But I know that they come into this world and I love them unconditionally.
Mhm.
And thank goodness I had the space and the safety and the support and the self-work to kind of be the parent I wanted to be. That's great.
Mhm.
Does that always mean I was the parent they needed? I tried, but I hope so. But only they can tell me that, right? Because when children come into the world, they need you unconditionally. But it's not their job to love us unconditionally. And that's so important to know that our kids have the freedom to feel how they feel. I don't get to tell them how to feel. I get to hold the space for how they feel. And that's a huge aspect of
Mhm.
love.
And that goes back to objectification, right? And the way that it very sneakily gets in the way of all of these relationships, because a lot of times we are telling kids that, you know, oh yeah, you have to love your family,
Mhm.
right? Like that's just how it works. But it's not, because love is action, and love is a response and a reaction. And if you're hurting me and hurting me and hurting me and hurting me, it doesn't matter that I'm a kid, like you're gonna
Yeah.
break it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're going to break it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times folks don't recognize all the ways that they're not seeing people as people. And so it comes back to those things of, as much as I don't like Gottman, it comes back to like the four horsemen of like,
Yeah.
you get that resentment of like, well, but I did this for you. No, you didn't. You didn't do it for them. You did it so that you could feel good that you are embodying or personifying this thing the way you think it should. You never asked them what they wanted.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't ask them if they wanted flowers. You didn't ask what kind. You didn't ask if that term of an endearment was comfortable for them,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right? You are trying to create something. And so I think too, what is really important when we talk about love and we talk about whether it's friends, whether it's romantic, whether it is your regular hot dial booty call, like having these discussions so that we are actually seeing people as people and not as ways to fulfill our needs,
Mm-hmm.
without discussion and consent. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's the other thing of like, guess what? Caretaking is also a trauma response.
Yep.
Mhm.
Like
Absolutely.
we focus on a lot of the bad things, right? We focus on avoidance or cheating or running away, but also like that I didn't sleep because I stayed up all night cooking for you so that you would have food all week because I know you're going on this trip. Nobody asked you to do that.
Yep.
And that self-sacrifice, that martyrdom, like actually may be the opposite of what you're trying to do.
Hmm.
Yeah. If you're doing those things because you genuinely want to do them, that's fine. But if you have an expectation that the food will then get eaten and appreciated and whatever, that's not okay. You know, you have to do what works for you for others. And of course, when we have young children, as I did, you get stretched and it's really important to follow through. But I understood that they were part of my ambitions. I wanted kids. It was something I really wanted. Therefore, I had to stretch and grow to deal with the package, that what came along with it. I had to be prepared for that. And so it's not like every moment you're continually choosing. You wake up at 2 a.m. You'd prefer not to, let's be honest. But the kid needs to be fed, and that's important to you. So you're going to do that. You know, you get called 11:30, hey, Mom, can you give me a lift home? I missed the last bus. You go do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can, you go do that. And so I think that that's where there's an underlying framework and a process by which I make the decisions about how I want to give love, how I'm able to give love, what I can do today. But that is not to say that I'm doing it with the intent to be appreciated in a specific way, because no one's an extension of me, not my partner, not my kids, not my friends. So, yeah.
I guess that was another thing. Like it's terrible to say now, but like at one point I did have that. I had a group of friends where I'm like, I had an expectation of like, I'm gonna do this really nice thing and they're gonna react like this, and then they didn't, and I went, ah, and I just kind of eventually gave up on that, and I thought that was the unhealthy thing to do, but then it turned out that was the healthy thing to do, where I'm like, oh, I just stopped having expectations of that.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a little more nuance, right?
Yeah.
It's not that like stop having expectations, but being aware of your expectations so that you can actually decide of like, are you staying within your locus of control, what your agency and your autonomy is, or are you trying to control everyone around you? And including their reaction, right? So like even the phrases of like, yes, we can make people angry. If I know what makes you angry and I do that thing to get a rise, I am trying to make you angry. If my expressing that I'm not interested in sexual activity with you, like your reaction to that is anger, I did not make you angry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to come back to this caretaking as a trauma response for a second, because I think it's quite ingrained in a lot of habit patterns if you experience trauma. So I'm going to speak a little bit to my experience personally of it. I experienced a fair amount of abandonment growing up, emotional abandonment, actual abandonment in that parents who had been there weren't, and other sets of people were taking care of me. And I learned to be pretty convenient to people. You know, I learned to be, as best I could, convenient, because it's hard to relax in relationships when you feel you're optional. So from that perspective, that caretaking is part of, well, I'll just not make trouble. I'll just do what I can, and so that's one way it certainly showed up. And another way it can show up is, I don't want to ever abandon anyone. So I'm going to do everything to keep people happy, and on one hand, that can come from a place of, I've been abandoned and therefore I don't want to be an abandoner. I'm not going to break up with this person yet because, even though I want to end the relationship, they're going through this other thing, and boy, that wouldn't work. So I guess I'll stick around for a while, right? You can see how that's such a problem. On one hand, it speaks to I'm in their business and in their, I'm sort of supporting their life to the detriment of my own truth.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to really be mindful about the decisions we make around the narratives that we've experienced and what that means about how we want to be in the world. So I don't want to ever abandon anyone, or, my mom didn't do X thing for me, so I'm going to make sure I always do it for my kids. May not be relevant to them. There may be other ways you need to show up for them that you're not seeing because you're so busy focused on this thing. Yeah. So part of really being not abandoning is being fully present to yourself first, as best you can. I have ADHD, so it comes and goes, let's be frank. But But as best as I can, it's like staying in tune with like, okay, what's happening for me? And then listening for what's happening for others and making decisions from that. What's going to work for me? What's going to be a support? What I can do, or do I need to take care of me? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that like that piece of self, right? Of like, it's very cute and trendy in America for like focus on the self, but like we also have a communal self, a self that is intimately and intricately part of the world. But the point is that in order to engage healthily with your communal self, you have to know your individual self. And we live in a world that is very invested on ensuring we hate ourselves in some way, shape, or form. And when we don't like ourselves, when we don't know ourselves, it is very hard to see other people as people. Because why would you? If you don't get to be a person, why should anyone else? And while that's not a conscious thought process for a lot of people, I'll ask folks in sessions sometimes, what would it mean if you saw yourself as a person? And a lot of times that'll stop people, because that's the point where they're like, wait, I've never actually thought about what it would mean for me to see myself as a person. And that opens that door. And so when we're talking about intimate friendships, queer platonic relationships, romantic sexual relationships with one or multiple people, these things come up. Mitra said in a previous episode, like sometimes it's not until the thing is happening that that door reopens. And relationships bring up all of our stuff because they are the epitome of being in the world and our opportunity for connection and aliveness in the world, in a world that doesn't tend to make many of us feel particularly alive. And so that can be hard to honor and steward in another person when you're not seeing it for yourself. And so, but also it can be easier to steward it for other people before you could steward it for yourself. And that's why we need community. That's why we need to question how hierarchical we're holding relationships, because there's a difference between the boundaries of a relationship and a hierarchy of a relationship.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think this
No,
we're just like Trevor's right there.
Yeah, no, the thing is, I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, I have to start winding down, but like, I don't want to. I'll throw it as this. We're getting towards the end of the episode here. Is there any other last points that either of you want to touch on before we go?
Learn from other relationship modalities and other ways of interacting and being in relationship and being sexual than what your predominant modality or predominant identities are. We didn't get into it a lot because like PG-13, but like there's a lot you can learn from like BDSM and kink communities when it comes to talking through these things and like getting rid of the like, well, it's always awkward and it's never sexy or fun. And it's like, one, it doesn't have to be sexy or fun. Two, yes, it can be. So just be open.
When we talked about this before, particularly regarding I guess, traditional forms of relationship that are PG-13 that we talk about. So when we talk about like BDSM and kink communities and the ways in which they navigate consent and boundaries, I think that bringing that into just how we think about relationship is so important, because it does open up that idea of, I thought I always had to do this thing. But I want to talk about the situations in which it does work for me and doesn't work for me. And it brings that personhood into the picture, which is, I'm here too. community is about me too. I am part of something and I get to have a voice. Yeah.
I like that.
And the conversation can happen anytime. And there's no, just because it didn't land like immediately doesn't make it wrong. Doesn't mean that you were withholding. And so, aftercare and check-ins, not just for kink fam.
Yeah.
There's another
And I
good
think
t-shirt.
that's it. Continuing relationships create room for continuing discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that. We got to start wrapping things up. Cassie, thank you so much for joining us today and talking with us. This has been absolutely enlightening. If people want to find you and what you do on the interwebs, where could they do so?
So I am at Mental Woke on Twitter. I am at Intersections LLC on Instagram. I am generally around. I do a lot of trainings and talking and speaking gigs, not just about games and stuff, but also about other things. I am currently working to completely destroy and reshape how licensure is done in social work and adjoined mental health professions, because maybe racism isn't prestige, but so that's what you'll see on my Twitter. Just know it's not all games. But that's where you can find me. I am we just finished our most recent panel for the Identity and Mental Health Gaming panel series, which is my baby. That is pretty grown up and almost finished. So you can check those out on YouTube. The South and Southeast Asian one that we did on Saturday is still currently on takethis.org's Twitch channel. And then you'll see me around doing other things with Take This, and you can also find me at Take This.
Awesome.
With Dr. B, who I will let out of the closet.
It's a tall closet. Mitra, where can people find you and what you do on the interwebs?
It has to be a tall closet. It's unbelievable. So I'm at Mitra Jordan. I'm also at mitrajordan.com. And by the way, that South Asian and Southeast Asian mental health panel was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So I am following along. Yes.
Fantastic.
But that's where I can be found. Yeah. You'll see me in a week or so too. Or no.
Oh yeah.
This is
our season 7 finale. We'll be back at some point. I think we're still figuring that out, but we will be back. So keep an eye out for that on the Twitch schedules that go out. But yeah, that is going to do it for this week's episode. Again, Cassie, thank you so much. You can follow me.
Thanks for having me.
We would love to have you back to talk more. Absolutely, and we will probably set that up in the future.
We will find reasons.
Yes.
They won't be hard to find.
The amount of things I can talk about, I'll break everybody's brain on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I know you set that as kind of a goal, and
The goal achieved. I've seen several messages from it already. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at the Treavor. There is an A hiding in there. But thank you so much to our mods, Jordan and Mars, for doing a fantastic job in the chat, and as you always do. And thank you to Codename Entertainment and Take This for giving us an opportunity to have these discussions. I believe everything else is, as far as scheduling goes, is normal for the week. But you can always keep up to date on our Twitch schedule, on our Reddit, Discord, and Twitter. I got it right in the first go this time. It only took me a whole season.
Mimics unwrapping bow tie.
I love that. Oh my gosh. All right, but yeah. So keep an eye out for when we'll be back. But we'll be back with more fun and important conversations to have. But until then, take care of yourself. And I didn't get the button ready to press. So now everybody, bye.
Champions of Psychology is meant as education and entertainment. It is not a substitute for medical advice or professional counseling. Discussion of mental health topics will be primarily rooted in research and the personal experiences and self-disclosures of the hosts. While we can provide generalized education and possible mental health resources, we cannot offer any recommendations, advice, or opinions for any specific persons, cases, or situations. We provide these resources and links at our sole discretion, but have not necessarily vetted or reviewed any resource. We assume no liability for the use of the information or resources on these sites, and we encourage you to use your own best judgment.